It was 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just was laying there just bawling my eyes out, and I just started begging God for help. Please, God, help me. Please, God, help me. I can't live like this. I can't do this. Please help me. An overwhelming presence came down over me like words can't describe. I actually heard an audible message, and I don't know how to describe it other than it felt like I was talking to myself, like it was coming from within, but it was in third person. And basically it just said,
with this podcast, what we're trying to do is have real, authentic discourse.
John, it's good to have you today.
yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, so just to kind of, give you a little bit more background on you being a guest here. This is our podcast we started this year, and we call it Treatment Redefined. And really the objective of it is to have thought leaders in a variety of areas within the whole treatment space. It could be within neurotesting, some of the neuropsychological exams that we do, treatment experts in various categories. So I'm really excited to have you today. We've known each other for actually several years.
Long time.
Spent a lot of time together. I think the areas we're going to talk about are areas that not a lot of people know a tremendous amount about, being interventions and being sober living. Now, I'm biased. I've worked with you a long time, but I think you run one of the best sober living houses that we've experienced in the course of the last 17 years.
Appreciate you.
Being the Patton house. And so I think today we're going to kind of circle around and get a better understanding. What are interventions? How do they get done? And then let's merge into sober living. Let's talk about it. What's the role of it in treatment? And maybe give people a real good feel for what it's like to be in one.
Yeah.
And what are the benefits of being in a quality one. But I thought maybe we would just kick it off with give people a feel for just, who you are, your background, where you're from, and maybe touch on how you got into this space. Because I always find it's interesting. If you're in the behavioral health space, usually you've kind of been pulled into it for one reason or another. There's something that draws you in. And maybe just give people a feel for, how your passion behind this and how you got here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I just want to say, David, really appreciate you having me today and appreciate
Yes.
the kind words for sure. I'm 46 now, have 2 young kids, 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Got started a little later in life due to some of the struggles I went through myself. Mm-hmm. And as you kind of touched on, or the way I like to put it is, we don't really choose this profession. It chooses us.
That's right.
And so, honestly, from a young age, I was interested in psychology, kind of like human behavior, why people behave the way they do. Mm-hmm. And that was due to growing up with an aunt who was bipolar, schizophrenic, didn't really receive proper care. And so that was sad to watch. And so then fast forward went to play football at Austin College in Sherman, was a double major only because, my dad was like, I'm not going to pay for psychology. Like, what are you going to do with that? And so it was a double major. And then due to family pressure, mostly from my dad, I was going to go to law school, So then a semester away from graduating from Austin College and headed to law school, I caused a drinking and driving car accident that was really bad. Mm-hmm. A guy that was 25 in the other vehicle was killed. 2 people were injured. So I went from having 0 criminal history to facing 15 years in prison.
Yeah.
And it was a couple weeks after the accident and meeting with my attorney and him telling me they wanted to put me in prison for 15 years that I had a spiritual experience like words can't really describe. Mm-hmm. I was laying in my room crying uncontrollably. It was 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just was laying there just bawling my eyes out, and I just started begging God for help. Please, God, help me. Please, God, help me. I can't live like this. I can't do this. Please help me. An overwhelming presence came down over me like words can't describe. I actually heard an audible message. Every time I tell people that, it sounds weird to say it because, I go to church on Sundays, and anytime I hear somebody say, and the voice of God told me, you're like, all right, well, What's his voice sound like? That's interesting. Are you sure?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to describe it other than it felt like I was talking to myself, like it was coming from within, but it was in third person. And basically it just said, John, I've given you a gift. You're going to help young people. It was specifically about young people, but I now work with people of all ages, but you're going to help young people and you're going to be okay. Just like that. And so within an hour.
How many years ago was that?
That was in 2002.
Okay.
So I was 22 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. And within an hour of that happening, I was in front of my academic advisor telling him I wanted to drop law school and I wanted to be a counselor. And he just said, I think you'd be good at that, John. And so ended up being out on bond for 5 years. During that time, got my master's to be a therapist. Was actually working as a counselor at a residential treatment center in downtown Dallas, kind of for the indigent population. And out of the blue, my attorney called and he said, I can't postpone the trial any longer. They're going to offer you 4 years in prison instead of 15. If you do not plead guilty and sign for the 4, then they're going to take it to trial immediately and they're going to ask a jury for 20. And so, that was a fairly easy decision to make. So I pled guilty and signed for 4 years, and by the grace of God, only did 20 months in prison. And then the real miracle is that I went in front of the licensing board in Austin, and they granted me permission to sit for my licensing exam while I was on parole. And so I just hit the ground running, and had a private practice starting in 2009. A guy named Sonny McCutcheon trained me to do interventions in 2009, took me under his wing. Would not be here if it were not for Sonny and God connecting us. And but here's what was interesting is while I was in prison, me and my dad had always kind of had a strained relationship of sorts, but he wrote me a letter every single day. So every single day I'd get a letter from my dad. And one of these letters said, hey, John, I met this guy in Dallas, and he owns this, he called it a halfway house, maybe he said sober living home, but he said, I think you ought to open one of these whenever you get out. And so it was back in 2007, 2008 that I was visualizing Patton sober living, what it would look like, which I didn't know that much about sober living back then. And so, we finally opened the first house in February of 2013, so about 12 and a half years ago. And so it's been a wild ride.
Oh, my gosh.
It's been a journey.
It's an amazing story, background. Yeah. I've heard you touch on it at times when you've come to some of our dinners where we meet with some other folks in the industry that we work with. But the depth of that story is incredible, actually. But it sets you up for everything that you've been doing, in your life since.
Yeah.
And it gives you immense credibility when you're working with a lot of people that are hurting, trying to figure out how to get help, that feel like they're at the absolute, depths of despair. There is always hope, right?
Always hope. Yeah. And, as far as my sober living homes, which, as consists of 4 homes in North Dallas, I not only, hire people who are in recovery, but I actually hire people who have powerful stories of recovery so that they can look these guys in the eyes and be like, man, I've been there, I've done that, and there is hope. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm now married with 2 young kids. Life is great.
That's right.
And so try to be an inspiration to these guys of if they stay the course, that, they can make it.
Yep. No, I think it's wonderful. And I mean, just knowing you and having had experience in working with you at your sober living homes, I understand completely why they're as successful as they are, and they're just great environments for people. We're going to dive into some of that today and kind of tease that out. Let's swim around a little bit in. So you mentioned Sonny McCutcheon. We know Sonny. We've known Sonny since we started Enterhealth about 18 years ago. He's great. He is, kind of a legend in the field.
He is a legend.
I've always mentioned to folks, it seems like in the behavioral health space, it's a big, small space. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody always seems to have an opinion on everybody, but universally, everybody likes Sonny.
For sure. Everyone likes Sonny.
Everybody likes Sonny. He's real knowledgeable. He was real instrumental in the early years for us and trying to understand, how we should do certain things on campus or hiring of certain people or certain types of treatments. But he's always been he's kind of been a benefactor to Enterhealth as well. He's been wonderful to work with.
Yeah.
Now, we've worked with him over the years in the intervention space, and that's something that you do as well, is interventions. Matter of fact, I think we just recently worked on a patient this past week together. Yep. Maybe give people just a feel for, I was talking to someone the other day that had just joined us, and they were asking questions, what is an intervention? Why do you need one? What do you do in one? Like, what is the process of this? Maybe just give people a little feel for, what is it? What is the role of it? And then let's go through, how do you actually put one together to make one successful? Because I think there's an art to this.
Definitely.
And what's the background you need to really get going in this space?
Yeah, definitely. So, there's kind of two different types of interventions. There's the kind of surprise intervention, which is the one I specialize in, and then there's more of an invitational approach. I will say that, at least to my knowledge, families never hire me to do an intervention unless they feel it's next to impossible to get their loved one help. Right. So whether it's a wife calling me about their husband or a mom and a dad calling me about their son, to my knowledge, people don't hire me unless they feel like it's an impossible situation.
That's right.
Right. And so I think whenever parents or loved ones in general, spouses, are in a seemingly impossible situation, meaning their son or their spouse is just in extreme denial and refusing to accept any type of help, then that's whenever they call me. And it's interesting. People always ask me, what's a success rate? And so I don't know like the global numbers on how successful interventions are globally or even, nationally. But by the grace of God, my wife actually told me the other day, because she always hears me on the phone, and she's like, John, I feel like you're too wishy-washy. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I can tell when people ask you what's the chances of success, you're always like, well, there's no guarantees. I can say that for me, I can't really remember the last time I was not able to get the person to go. But as Sonny taught me, it's not what we do and say as the interventionists that get the person into treatment. It's what we prepare the family to do and say differently than what they've always done and said before. I think that's
it right there. We've brought you in on a number of situations over the years, and it typically is like what you described. It's a situation where you've got a loved one calling for somebody. I mean, sometimes they'll even come out, the loved one that needs treatment will even come out to our facility. But they'll say, I'm just not going to do it. The family, everybody around them knows they need treatment more than anything. So we'll come to you and say, look, I think we're to a point where we can't really get this loved one into treatment. We're going to need some help. So you get involved. But one of the things I've always appreciated is you get involved, you're really working with the family.
Yes.
So maybe just give people a feel for, what is that process like? Like, what are you really setting up? Is it kind of, are you anticipating like all of the objections that could come, the challenges that you're going to be faced, setting the guidelines, like these are the hard lines you need to be prepared for?
Yeah.
Kind of maybe just give people a feel for that.
Kind of to go from A to Z, oftentimes a big part of the process is intervening on one of the interveners so that the intervention can occur. So, oftentimes, the mom might be very determined to get her son help, just as an example. Maybe it's the dad very determined. And then if it's the mom very determined, sometimes the dad is like, well, he's in college. Like, people party in college. I partied in college, and so oftentimes it's me really doing essentially a biopsychosocial assessment. And so I gather as much information as I possibly can from the person who makes that initial phone call to me, Because then if, let's say, the dad is kind of on the fence about whether or not his son needs help, I simply, when I'm talking to the dad, as an example, will read my notes. And all of a sudden, when you hear as a dad who's kind of like on the fence about whether or not to get his son help, when he hears all of these facts, so I'm not giving my opinion at that point. I'm just like, sir, are all of these things true that your wife told me? And I read all this stuff. He's like, yes. And I'm like, I don't want to convince you to do an intervention, because if you're not fully on board, then we don't need to do this. But it seems to me that your son definitely needs help, and so sometimes it's intervening on one of the interveners so the intervention can occur. But then once everyone is on board, specifically the key enablers in the person's life, right?
Yep.
Because you can't go into an intervention if the person has an option other than to get help.
That's right.
Like if they have an option to go stay at grandma's house, they're going to choose it.
Absolutely.
If they have an option to have dad put them up in a hotel or an apartment, they're going to choose that.
Yep.
But once everyone is on board, then I help them put together a very powerful team. And so there is power in numbers. And so oftentimes a mom or a dad or maybe a spouse will say, well, we just don't really have any friends. We just moved here from Chicago. Or, no one really knows about this. He has some aunts and uncles. He has some cousins, that could be a part of it. And I always try to include grandparents. That always adds a level of seriousness to the intervention. It's easy to say no to mom and dad. It's easy to say no to John Patton, who you've never met.
Right.
Once you have grandpa, grandma, an uncle, an aunt, then you're like, oh, wow. And so I just tell the parents, I'm like, look, I get it. They don't currently know about what's going on, but they need to know, so that he can't call them and get money from them or work them over to start enabling him. And so secrets keep us sick.
Yep.
And so everyone needs to know about what's going on. And once they're educated and knowledgeable about what's going on, then they're probably going to be chomping at the bit to be a part of this. And we need them to be a part of it, And so we put together a very solid team. That's key. And then the other key is the intervention letters, which I actually call love letters. So a really good book written on interventions, the way I facilitate them, the way Sonny taught me to facilitate them, is called Love First. It's the title of the book. So this isn't about shaming. This isn't about heaping guilt on someone and telling them they're a terrible person. This isn't tough love. And I'll touch on that in a second. But love first. And so I send all of the members of the intervention team these very detailed instructions on how to write essentially a love letter. And so it's just very simple. I love you. These are all of the reasons that I love you. If it's a parent from birth until now, I'll even tell the parents, talk about how much you loved him before he was even born. Are you a Christian? Most people will say yes, no judgment if they're not. How much did you pray to have just a healthy kid? How much did you pray for him before he was even born? Like, dude, we loved you before you even came into this world. We love you more than you could ever imagine. And so I'll tell family members to talk about, fond memories that not only will conjure up emotion in the person we're intervening on, but also conjure up emotion in them. And so it really is a spiritual experience, for lack of a better word. I mean, it really is. And so I love you. These are all of the reasons that I love you. And I'm worried about you. And these are all of the reasons that I'm worried, because often the individual who's wrapped up in the addiction, they don't remember all the details of the drunken episodes or whatever it is they've done, while under mind-altering substances. And so whenever they're sitting there hearing kind of these details of like what their loved ones have witnessed or what they've learned about, it's powerful. And so then that becomes a little bit difficult to say no to. And so help them put together a team. I instruct them on how to write good intervention letters. Then we do what's called an intervention rehearsal. Usually it's the day before the intervention. Bare minimum, the rehearsals are about 3 hours. And so that seems like a long time, but it goes by pretty quickly. And so for on average about 3 hours, we're sitting there. I decide the speaking order, who's going to read their letter first, all the way to who's going to read their letter last. I have everyone read their letters to make sure. I'm like, guys, let's everyone put ourselves in your son's shoes or in whoever's shoes. And I want everyone to really listen to these letters. And so, we don't want to make any assumptions about things he is maybe doing because there's enough facts to not have to make assumptions that he's then going to argue with or get upset about. Right. And so it's a pretty in-depth process. The other thing is during that 3-hour rehearsal, you do become a part of the family system. And so it's very interesting. Generally speaking, going into the intervention rehearsal, there's usually at least one person who thinks that this is kind of a waste of time. And they'll say that sometimes during the rehearsal, like, look, I'm just here to support, so-and-so, that's my sister, or, that's my daughter, whoever, I'm just here for support. But guys, there is no way that he is gonna handle this well. Like this isn't gonna go well. By the end of the rehearsal, that person is like, wow,
we can do this. This might work.
I think this is going to work. Literally, I think this is going to work. And that's exciting for me. I'm kind of like, told you. We got this. And so then, you decide basically where you're going to do the intervention, all those things, come up with a million different contingency plans. And so me as the interventionist, I'm planning for World War III to the extent that going into the rehearsal, I'm like, guys, we're going to have to plan for worst case scenarios. And as I'm talking about possible things that he could maybe do, you may be thinking to yourself, well, he would never do that. And I hope that's the case, but we have to be prepared for any possible thing that could come our way, And so, for instance, an intervention that I did a couple weeks ago, we had so much leverage that the family was ready to use in order to get them to accept help. We didn't have to use any of it. That's the other thing about the Love First model, right? And so if anyone's ever watched the TV show Intervention, oftentimes they'll sit the person down and just immediately kind of say, you know what, I love you very much, but if you do not get help, you are out of my life forever. Right. I am done. And it's like, whoa.
Yep.
What if they would not have to have heard that in order to accept help? What if they just would have accepted help based on the love and concern that their family members have for them?
That's right.
Which is oftentimes the case, especially for anyone about 28 years old or older. That's kind of, the brain's finally fully developed.
That's right. And
they can kind of rationalize and, think about what's going on. But then fast forward to an intervention, yes, that you referenced that I did on this past Monday, and this kid's 21, and so I told the parents, I said, guys, I really hope we're able to get him to go the most loving, easy way possible, based on my experience. And based on the enabling that has been going on, meaning he's smoking pot in his room all day, every day, 21 years old, has been very enabled, parents allowing him to use in the house. I said, I think he is going to try to call our bluff. And I think he might actually say that he's going to leave and go make it on his own. And he might even go and pack a bag. And I said, so just don't gasp, don't worry. The intervention's not over at that point.
Right.
And so with him, we did have to use the leverage of, hey man, if this is your final answer, and your final answer is you're not going to get this help, which I think you need, you've kind of mentioned to your parents that things aren't going well, then your parents have made some decisions of their own, and that's where his dad read what's called a bottom line letter. And so I only use the bottom line letters if we have to.
Right.
And the bottom line letter in this case was, look, if you don't get this help, you have to go pack a bag today. You cannot stay here any longer. We're not going to give you any financial support. You're not going to have your car. That being said, the second you're ready to get help, you can call us any day, anytime. Doesn't matter where you are, and we will pick you up immediately and take you to Enterhealth. And so that's love. Tough love is you're a screw up, you're an addict, get out of our life. Tough love doesn't work.
Right.
Love is, you know what, I love you enough to do everything it takes to get you the help you need, even if it's something that's very hard for me, which is to have you living at your buddies doing drugs,
Right.
and me not sleeping at night. But I love you enough to do that if that's what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is so interesting. You got me thinking about so many different things because a lot of what you're talking about is also like the approaches you need to take, I think, in treatment when people eventually reach treatment. I mean, you're bringing the family involved. And one of the things when we began Enterhealth that we felt like was going to be crucial, it makes the treatment arguably a little more difficult at times for therapists, is to take the families on from the beginning because they know you best. They have a lot of history with you. And we realized from the early days, if we don't learn to repair that family network, then we're setting this up for it to be unsuccessful when you go back home. They need to understand what you're going through, really why you're having these feelings, the disease of addiction model, everything. You need to be part and parcel to it. Plus, there's a lot of repair work that needs to happen with families. But listening to the kind of love-first approach, I think that is, you're hitting at like a core, really heart-moving element in treatment that I think it's hard to get there because often there's been so many trials and tribulations with that loved one that you're mad and you're angry and you want to just shout to the rooftops about how mad you are at this loved one for what they're doing. But to really break through, I think having that love-first approach is ideal. And if you're able to kind of conjure that and get everybody in an intervention in the family kind of aligned with that message, I bet you more often than not that's pretty successful. You probably don't have to hit kind of the bottom letter approach that you're talking about, kind of this is the end of the rope letter. If you don't do these things, then this is what's going to happen. You probably win more often than not by taking that approach.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely cannot remember the last time I was not able to get someone to come with me the day of the intervention. And so I travel with the person to the treatment center, whether it's hopping on a plane, whether it's driving them, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
In the event, since 2009, I mean, we're talking about countless interventions. I used to do them full time, meaning 1 to 2 interventions a week for a very long time. But once I opened the first sober living home, in February 2013, then I backed off the interventions quite a bit.
Yep.
And so now I don't do nearly as many. Also with kids, don't have time. But whenever I look back all the way to 2009, even the people who did not allow me to take them to treatment that day, they always went within 24 to 48 hours if the family stayed strong.
Yep.
And of course, I stayed with the families, and giving them support, helping them stay strong. So yeah, it's a very successful process.
It is, and there's a lot of them can be unsuccessful. We've been doing this for a long time, and in the early days, we would work with different people that were in the intervention space, and preparation sets it up for success. And having the right approach, I really believe, gives you a high probability that you're going to get that loved one to go into treatment, if not then, probably immediately afterwards. But if you don't put in the preparation and the work and you kind of wing it and you get in there and you don't, you get argumentative, it will turn into a spiral and it just won't work.
And could potentially make things worse.
Yes, exactly. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.